Welcome to the 41st in a series of shows focused on Brookline as an age-friendly community. In 2012, Brookline, the Brookline community, was designated New England's first age-friendly city by the UN World Health Organization. This was based on a commitment of the Brookline residents, the select board, the town departments, and leadership by Brookline Can, an all-volunteer organization that works on issues in Brookline for residents of all ages. Now that we've been through the town meeting, the election, and we've proceeded on with regular town business, our guest today is the person most involved with that. Our guest is Charles Carey, town administrator. He's responsible for managing and providing leadership for all the town departments. Chaz is responsible for the day-to-day and strategic operations of the largest non-city municipality in Massachusetts, Brookline. Used to be years ago Framingham. And give you some background on Chaz. He led the New York City Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery Operations, ran programs that helped vulnerable communities during the times of Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Ida, and COVID-19 pandemic. Concurrently, Chaz was also a special counsel to the New York City Health and Hospitals. He worked on a pandemic support he provided to the legal team. That's the largest public health department in the US. Chaz holds a JD from Georgetown, MFA from Warren Wilson, and a BA from Columbia. He grew up in Concord, but now he's in Cambridge with his wife. She's a Harvard Business School lecturer, Christina Wallace, and their 2 children. Welcome, Chaz.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
So I know this should be obvious, but the role of the town administrator, I have heard anybody I've talked to has given me a different take on it, of citizens.
Well, it's interesting. So the role of the town administrator is described in actually a state law. Brookline has a state law called the Town Administrator Enabling Act. And we've had that since 1982. That was kind of the beginning of the modern town administrator role here in Brookline. They would previously tried the idea in the 40s, went back to something called an executive secretary, and then they kind of went back to this role. The idea of a town administrator is community still wants to have an executive elected body, and that's the select board. In lieu of something like a mayor, they want to have a communal group of people making executive decisions. But they realize that if you have a group of 5 people making executive decisions, sometimes it can be hard to come to consensus, and it can be very hard to run the day-to-day operations of a large-scale community. So they appointed a town administrator. And then the relationship there is that the select board sets the agenda. They say, this is what's important to the community. This is what we want to have happen. These are the issues that you should be prioritizing. And then they tell me, you need to figure out how to execute on those. So I am really a chief operational officer, chief administrative officer, and my job is to execute on the agenda of the select board. Oftentimes it can be a long-term, far-ranging agenda with a lot of smaller component parts, like we'd like to be fossil fuel free by 2040, or it could be something concrete and immediate, like we'd like you to get rid of the rats, please. And so all of those things, both long-term and short-term, fall into my purview. And then I will say that it's not me alone, obviously. Brookline is a town of 63,000 people. We're really, really fortunate to be served by an incredible group of department heads and department leadership, and really just all the way down, an excellent core of municipal staff that makes sure that this town runs as effectively and efficiently as it can.
And a lot of citizenry with a lot of backgrounds, with a lot of comments.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of input. So,
But that's one of the beauties of the town system of government, right? And historically, Brookline has been a very volunteer-driven community. I think that's one of the things that makes it attractive to people is that your voice can be heard. The community voice is really important. So I think that's we joke about it. Yes, Brookline. I keep reading that Brookline has the most degrees per square foot of any community in the country.
Yeah, we worked with someone, Frank Carey, who started a lot of this back in 2000, in the early 2000s. And he used to point out that there was not only were there, for each citizen was there a different opinion, but they could back it up and support it,
right,
even if they're opposed.
Right.
So luckily, you're not at least dealing with the what the select board does, which is reelection, but you're the one who gets the day-to-day information and the day-to-day input. So,
right.
So I think I admire you. It's best now. Speaking of communication, I was going to ask you about your the police department and the various relationships that you have with them, but I think you just described that they basically report to you. Is that correct?
Yes. All the public safety offices report to me. The only town department that doesn't report to the town administrator's office is the schools. The schools are independently run and managed by a superintendent, and the superintendent reports to the school committee, not the select board.
Yeah, not everybody realizes that. It's a really important thing during voting time, et cetera, because budgets are separate. A lot of things. The IT is separate, right?
There's some overlap there. It's actually, if folks are interested, folks want to get into the real nitty-gritty of municipal governance, the town school partnership is meeting more regularly. That's an organization that tries to figure out who does what and how the budget is designed. Right now the budget in the town is split around 60-40. The schools get around 60% of all the revenue that comes in, and the town gets around 40%. And it's a balance. It's a very delicate balance. The schools provide a lot of value to this community, and it's why a lot of people come here. And you have to be able to provide that level of high service that people have come to expect, while also providing a level of municipal service that people come to expect too, living in a community that has schools as good as Brookline's. So it's a balance. We do share some services with the school. It would be my preference to share more, to limit, duplication of effort and save money. So hopefully over the next several months, we'll be able to do that.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great. That's something I've heard mentioned many times without any real actions on it. But that's a really, really good goal and really good, excellent. Speaking of the communication and how this program is older adults, obviously. And the question is, how do we learn what's happening? For instance, we lost newspapers.
Right.
We don't have any newspapers. How do we get now? I have to tell you that what you're putting out now, the newsletter, is already a big change and a big addition. Just to have that, I read it each time, and I learn each time, and I pass it on to local people I know and encourage them to read it. How can we communicate back to you, and how can you best get to us?
That's a great question. In terms of how, let me take them in reverse, how we can communicate better with the community, particularly communities that might have historically been harder to reach. Seniors obviously are a community that at times can feel isolated from, for any number of reasons from the broader community. I'm really committed to increasing our communication capacity across the board, being better communicators across all departments with the public. The newsletter is a great first step, and I want to particularly thank the Assistant Town Administrator for Operations, Devin Fields. She's really taken point on that work. She's taken it to heart. I said, I'd really like to do a newsletter. She agreed, and she's just been the heart and soul of it. So I really give her a lot of credit for that work. But we want to do more. And so it's my hope to really hire a community engagement specialist in my office who will do that kind of targeted outreach work to people who have historically been hard to reach. To make sure that people know about the services available to them and don't feel cut off from local government, whether that's because of a language access issue, a disability access issue, or just, isolation. It's really important for me to know that the message for the services about the services that we provide reaches the community. In terms of reaching us, on brooklinema.gov, there is a form to fill out, and I read, I joke with my team, I read my email. I'm very committed to routing questions and calls that I get to the appropriate departments. And I know the department heads are very good at following up. So when you have situations like that, I strongly encourage you, don't feel hesitant, drop a line. If I don't know who can help you, I could probably find someone who can. So it's important for me to hear from you on those issues.
I have two questions there. One, Brook Online is something, is that useful? I've used it and found it in the past.
I find it very useful, and it's growing in use. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great kind of area where if there are quality of life issues, for example, there's a sidewalk that's deteriorated, or you've got rodent control issues, any of those things. If you go to Brook Online and open a ticket there, that's what they call it. It's basically like filing a complaint, opening a ticket. You can track the progress of that. Oftentimes the Department of Public Works or the police or whoever is tasked with solving that problem will go out, check it out, take a picture if it's something that needs to be repaired, and make sure that that's done. So Brook Online is a great service. And, in the fall, we expanded that out to pest control. We want to get it even further out.
Yeah, I did notice the expansion. And I know in the past, I've seen responsiveness. I mean, obviously there might be a time where it goes longer, but I've seen sidewalks fixed within days. I've seen a light that was out. And then when I put it in, I mean, I don't put a lot in, but the ones I've always done. And now I see the additional categories. I've been watching that, and I'm really impressed, because those are just the kinds of things people ask about. How do I report? The second question was the Council on Aging. What's the relationship with the Council on Aging? I think I know it, but I'm not sure the audience does.
The Council on Aging, again, is a semi-independent body, right? They are ultimately a town organization. They're town funded and financed, but they have separate sources of funding that they get as well, grant funding and grant revenue. And the director, Ruth Ann Docek, I can't say enough wonderful things about the work that she's done over her many years of service to Brookline. I think she's entering her 41st year of service in this community, and she is just a force to be reckoned with. She is so committed to the help and assistance of our seniors, and really that wrap around, the taking people as they are, right? We don't view people's individual problems as things to be solved. When people come to us with a problem, we want to figure out what that person's life is like, how we address the whole person rather than just the immediate issue that comes in there, that holistic model. And Ruth Ann really embodies that work. So we are very lucky to have her.
I agree. I rely on her, and I think a lot of us do. I was saving the complex one, the override.
Yes.
And the budget. Okay. I'm going to leave that up to you. What you want to say about where we are, and later I'll get into the MBTA corridor. But
oh yes. So well, on the override, as I think your viewers may know, ordinarily property taxes are capped in Massachusetts. They can't rise above a set percentage. It's 2.5 plus any sort of a number called new growth that is generated every year based on the amount of additional revenue we might be able to expect. The only way property taxes can increase beyond that number is if the voters agree to it. And that requires going to the voters with something called an override. And that goes out. And what it says is, do you agree that your taxes can increase by this much? And Brookline passed, and we're very grateful that the voters passed a comprehensive package that includes around $7 million for the schools and $5 million for the town. It is one of the largest overrides. I believe it is the largest override that has ever passed in Massachusetts. And it is the largest override the town has ever received. The town has historically not been the major beneficiary of overrides. And so to receive $5 million for municipal services, when in the past we've received, one, maybe 800,000, is a real benefit to us. And from us to you. for the services that you provide, that we provide to you. The single largest line item on the town side that this funds is roads, complete streets, sidewalks, bike lanes. If you go to the DPW, the Department of Public Works' website, there's a wonderful transportation and mobility study that came out last year. It is an excellent document, comprehensive, but it painted a really bleak picture of Brookline's transportation. It basically said without a serious injection of funding, our roads and sidewalks would continue to deteriorate at a level faster than we could replace them. And it would require at least an additional $2.1 million just to kind of stanch the bleeding, really, get to a point where we could start thinking proactively as opposed to reactively, and trying to preserve what little we had as kind of the tide ate away at it. So we got that $2.1 million. We secured that amount of money. And what that means for us as a practical matter is the roads are safe. You know, the roads can be level funded. And then the grant money that we go for is not necessarily being used for those reactive projects, but can be used more proactively. We can do things like the major redevelopment of Washington Street that is coming in 2027. That's being done with a pairing of our funding and state funding. You know, a major thoroughfare needs major work. It's very exciting. But that kind of work requires us to be able to say to the community, we hear what your priorities are, and we want to be good stewards of your money and making sure that we're doing that. So we're very grateful for, you know, that and the many other projects, large and small, in there. You know, there's $500,000 in there to ensure that our wages stay competitive. Not my wages, but, you know, the wages of, you know, the single biggest beneficiary of that is going to be our social workers at the Council on Aging. I'm really excited to be able to pay them at a rate that is, you know, commensurate with the work that they do. So all things like that are all across the override, and I'm very grateful for the community's support in moving that through. And I want to continue to pledge to the community that we're going to use that money wisely as we move forward.
You'll get support the way you're going. You'll get support from us anyway. From me, pedestrian lighting is one of those things that I don't think that's in your. Where does that stand? It's something that is very important to us.
It is very important, and it is something that I know that the Transportation Division at the Department of Public Works has a focus on. I think the aim here right now is to really take stock, now that we have this additional infusion of money, in how we can be more strategic about how we deal with issues like pedestrian lighting, accessibility, things like accessibility for vision impaired people crossing streets, you know, adaptive signage, adaptive technology on that front. What this override does is it gives us breathing room. It allows us to say, whereas, you know, we previously would be, you know, frantically, throwing money at a problem as it arose, we can take our breath now and say we have the money necessary to do the bare minimum, the maintenance required. Now let's think strategically about how we're going to go street by street, identifying the areas with the most need and redeveloping them in such a way that ensures that they're well lit, that they're good for multimodal transportation, that the sidewalks are wide enough, that there is accessible lighting in all those places. All that stuff is on our radar now. So I'm really excited to be kind of coming out of what I've called this sort of pandemic related, you know, maintenance crouch almost. During the pandemic, we were all stuck in our homes, and government was stuck in its home too. You know, we were obsessed with providing basic services. Now we have the opportunity to think beyond that, and it's an exciting time to be in government.
Yeah, that's and the card is. Speaking of an exciting time in government.
Oh, yes. So we're, you know, this is an area where I think a lot of people have some questions because of a law the state passed recently, about 18 months ago, I think, under the Baker administration. It's called the MBTA Communities Act. And what it says is, if you receive a benefit from rapid transit from the MBTA, that is, if you've got train stations, T stations, buses in your town, you have to, at a certain point, create a big area of zoning in your community where multifamily housing, which is defined as more than 3 units in a building, can be allowed as of right. That is to say, you can't stop someone from building multifamily housing on those lots. You can set design parameters, but you can't stop them. And most of Brookline is covered by what's called a special permit rule. And what that does is, if you want to build something like multifamily, even in a built area like parts of North Brookline, you still have to go to a committee. You still have to go through a process where the committee could say no. The committee could say, we don't think that's commensurate with the neighborhood, so no. So that would take that opportunity away. And I think that really scares people because, obviously, there's general consensus that there's not enough housing in the areas of Massachusetts where people want to live. Brookline is one of those areas. We do have a lot of housing, though. We are a built-out community, and there's a concern that, if you allow this as of right, are we going to look more like Cambridge? Are we going to look more like those new developments in Somerville over by Union Square? Are we going to have those big towers, those big ugly glass towers? That doesn't feel like the kind of community that we built here. And so our planning department has really been working overtime to come up with creative solutions to this. We want to come up with a way that complies with the law, because if you don't comply with the law, you lose a lot of money, and the state will probably sue you. We don't want either of those things to happen. So come up with a way that complies with this law that does add meaningful amounts of housing, right? Brookline from 2015 to 2021 only built a net 600 units of new housing. That's towards the bottom of our comparator communities. The next closest community is Chelsea, and they built like 1,200. So we are behind comparative communities. And people will say, well, we already have a lot of housing. That's true, we do. But Chelsea has a lot of housing too. Somerville has a lot of housing, and they found a way to make it work. I don't think we're at a point where we are at capacity, but we have to grow smart, right? We don't want to be building, we don't want to be changing the character of the community and the tenor of that. We want to be able to keep providing good services to people. So the planning department has been looking at Harvard Street. Harvard Street, runs from the Boston border pretty much down to Route 9. And it's a major commercial thoroughfare, but there are some apartment buildings on it. And the thought would be, could we put a cap of 4 stories along Harvard Street so we don't get any big buildings? And could we use a design model called form-based zoning, where we basically draw a bunch of pictures of what we want the buildings to look like? We go out to the community. We've been holding these workshops with people, and they've been very well attended, where we say to them, all right, rather than saying what you don't want, tell me what an ideal building along Harvard Street looks like. Tell me, does it have big open windows on the bottom floor? What's it made out of? Does it have a flat roof? Does it have a sloping roof? Tell us what you want. And then we have a team that basically crunches the numbers and comes up with design specifications that honors that. So rather than getting this sort of architectural mishmash of buildings, which you can get in other sort of zoning situations where all you're trying to say is, well, I really don't want that. You get predictability. So even if someone says, all right, even if someone says, all right, I want to build new housing, they can't just build what they want. They have to build what the community wants. So that's the aim of this process. And I'm really excited to see how the community reacts to that and what the community ultimately decides to do.
Yeah, so am I. And I'm with you. I mean, that's exactly where my head is at. And I've heard a lot of different thinking on it. And it's pretty exciting, actually. Pretty exciting. It's the potential is there for everything. Good, but but the potential is really there. The other item that we were going to cover, which is I think was the tax, especially concern with older adults, is the tax breaks and existing taxes. How can you bring that some clarity to that?
Sure. Well, we're very grateful for the state and our representatives and our state senator for passing a home rule law for Brookline that allows for a senior means tested exemption for property taxes. We just went through the process, of setting the qualifications for that, and the qualifications, the asset caps and so forth. So
Yeah, so
And it was subject of a lot of discussion, other communities, set different caps and so forth. We're trying to be inclusive. We're trying to make sure that this actually reaches people and gives them relief. People with low income, who, especially people on fixed incomes, who may not be able to afford rising property taxes. We want to be sure that we're reaching those folks. And we want to do it in a way that's balanced and fair, right? We want to be in a situation where we're not then accidentally pricing people who are also on fixed incomes, but maybe don't qualify because they're not seniors yet. We want to be very cautious on that front. So we're looking at that program should be coming into effect this year, and that will be one of the many things that you can access on the assessor's website. So if you go to brooklinema.gov, you go to the departments, which is in the upper right-hand corner. The first department on there is the assessor's office. If you click on that, on the left-hand side, it says tax assistance and deferral programs. I'm literally reading from it as we look into the camera. If you click there, there is a long list of potential programs for individuals who may need tax assistance, and this program will join that list. The other thing I want to say is, the select board is really interested in this issue. Historically, we've had kind of programs and policies in place. And what the select board has said is, well, how many people are these actually helping? We had a discussion about the water and sewer abatement, and it turns out that it wasn't helping a whole lot of people. And the select board said, well, we got to change that. We got to think of a more inclusive way to help people with their water and sewer bills if they're seniors and they need that assistance. So they've tasked us and community members with thinking about a creative solution there. And I hope to see us talk about it more at the fall town meeting.
yeah, that's great. And this is happening this year, the next steps. There are breaks, things that will show up now, the various tax breaks and possibilities.
Yes. Yeah. So if you go to the assessors, if you haven't done so yet, strongly encourage you to go to that website. And just there's a lot of different programs. So it may feel overwhelming at first, but I encourage you to go through and don't be shy, don't be shy in applying and reaching out. Because if you qualify, we want to make sure you get those breaks.
Yeah, and I think people should go also recognize the senior center can help them. And
Yes.
Without any question. Speaking of Ruth Ann Dobek, but there's no question. Not that there are people at the senior center. Some of those people you were talking about that earlier. Now the other final thing, which we don't have much time, but just transportation. Is there any comments you have in that area? It's the only one we haven't covered.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ruth Ann, it's a real priority of Ruth Ann's, and I think it's wonderful, the work that she's been doing on this front. Newton has a micro-transit program for seniors that has been extremely successful. And we want to figure out how we can duplicate that success in a cost-effective way. I will say that Newton has been a victim of its own success because now the program costs a lot more money than I thought it was going to cost. And they got to find the money for it somewhere.
Well, we'll learn.
That's what we learned. So we want to make sure that as it gets more popular, that we can scale up efficiently and not create a hole in the budget and have to apologize and cut services for people. So that's where we are currently. We're trying to figure out a way to develop a microtransit system for seniors that does not that grows in such a way that doesn't accidentally fall off a cliff, basically.
Great. So we'll watch the spot, right? Okay. Keep an eye on what's happening in that over the next year or so. Yeah. Anything else you want to hit? You're welcome back, by the way, anytime. But
thank you.
No,
is there anything
you want to hit at the moment?
No, I just want to thank you, thank the whole team, thank your audience, and just to reiterate, I think we put this in the credits at the end. If you have questions or concerns, please reach out. If you can go to the website, sign up for the newsletter, stay informed. We would love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear any feedback you might have. So really looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
I think we're reaching the end. So I just want to tell everybody that the program tends to get rebroadcast several times. And it's also available on brooklinecan.org, the website, and also on the Brookline Can Twitter and Facebook accounts. And every once in a while, the town publishes at various places. But thank you and good night.
Good night.